a tractor manufacturer, built one of the most feared supercars ever to exist. Northern Italy, 1963. A new car company opens its doors. The man behind it had never designed a car in his life. No motorsport background, no formal engineering degree. Every dollar he had ever made came from tractors. Cheap ones, dirty ones, built from war scrap for farmers who couldn't afford anything else. And yet, 60 years later, his name sits on supercars worth $500,000. Cars people don't just buy, but obsess over. So, how does a tractor mechanic end up building something like that? It started with a failure, a small one, hidden inside a machine that wasn't supposed to fail. That was enough. This is how Lamborghini was born. And then, a conversation, one sentence, spoken by the wrong man on the wrong day to exactly the wrong person. That was enough. This is how Lamborghini was born. Ferruccio Lamborghini was born in 1916 in a small agricultural village in northern Italy. His family were grape farmers, and like most families in the region at the time, their life was defined by the land. Work was physical, repetitive, and predictable. The expectation was simple. You would inherit what your father built and continue the same life. But Ferruccio showed very little interest in farming. Instead, he was drawn to machines. He spent most of his early years in a small workshop, taking apart broken tools and mechanical equipment, not because he needed to repair them, but because he wanted to understand how they worked. That distinction mattered. He wasn't just fixing problems, he was studying systems. By his early 20s, his path still seemed fixed. He would likely take over the farm, live a modest life, and remain unknown. Then the war began. Ferruccio was drafted into the Italian Royal Air Force and assigned as a mechanic. He was stationed on the island of Rhodes, maintaining military vehicles under increasingly difficult conditions. When the Axis forces collapsed in 1945, the island was captured. Ferruccio was taken prisoner by British forces. For over a year, he remained in a prisoner of war camp. To stay alive, he had one job: keep the British military's broken trucks running. But there were no spare parts, no proper tools, nothing. If the truck stopped running, he stopped being useful. And in a prison camp, useless men don't last long. He learned to rebuild engines from scrap metal, to improvise solutions under pressure, to keep things running when they should have stopped. By the time he returned to Italy, he was no longer just a mechanic, he was a problem solver, and the entire country was about to hand him the biggest opportunity of his life. When Ferruccio returned to Italy in 1946, he came back to a country that had effectively collapsed. Infrastructure was destroyed, industrial production had stalled, the economy was unstable. But within that collapse, there was a very specific gap. Italy still needed to rebuild its agricultural sector. Farmers still needed machinery, and yet almost no one could afford to buy it. Most people saw a dead end. Ferruccio saw opportunity. Across the country, thousands of abandoned Allied military vehicles sat deteriorating in fields and roadsides. He began acquiring these machines at extremely low cost, stripped them down, repurposed their components, rebuilt them into functional tractors. But there was another problem. Fuel, gasoline was expensive, and most farmers could not sustain the cost. So Ferruccio engineered a workaround. A system that allowed engines to start on gasoline, then switch to diesel once running. It significantly reduced operating costs. It made his machines viable for the exact market he was targeting. In 1948, he founded Lamborghini Trattori. What started as a small operation grew into a structured production line. Within a few years, hundreds of tractors per month. He expanded into heating systems, then air conditioning. By his early 40s, he had accumulated substantial wealth, not inherited, not speculative, built from manufacturing, distribution, and scale. At that point, like many wealthy industrialists, he began buying cars, the fastest, most expensive machines in Europe. He didn't just drive them, he studied them. And there was one car in his garage that deeply frustrated him. A car that was supposed to be perfect, but wasn't. And that car, the one the opening was about, was a Ferrari. Ferrari, at the time, was not simply a car manufacturer. Enzo Ferrari was the most powerful, most feared name in Italian motorsport. His cars were considered the pinnacle of engineering. His approval or disapproval could make or destroy a reputation overnight. But Ferruccio's experience with the car was inconsistent. Fast, but not refined, powerful, but not reliable. The most persistent issue was the clutch. It failed repeatedly. Each repair meant sending the car back to Maranello. Each repair came at a significant cost. Eventually, Ferruccio decided to investigate the problem himself. He brought the car into his own workshop, had it disassembled. What he found stopped him cold. The clutch inside his Ferrari was not a specialized high-performance racing component. It was a standard commercial unit. The same supplier, the same mechanical structure, the exact same part he used in his own tractors. Ferrari was charging a significant premium for a component that was, by any engineering measure, completely ordinary. For Ferruccio, this wasn't just disappointing, it was an insult to the engineering. So he went to Maranello. He requested a meeting with Enzo Ferrari. His intention was not to start a fight. It was to suggest a fix, a better design, a practical solution. Enzo was not receptive. He listened briefly. Then he looked at Ferruccio. "You are a tractor manufacturer. You do not understand sports cars. Go back to your tractors." Ferruccio did not argue. He left. Not this time to a farm. Not this time to tractors. He went to build a supercar company, specifically to destroy the man who had just dismissed him. In 1963, Ferruccio founded Automobili Lamborghini. The factory sat only a few miles from Ferrari's headquarters. From a business perspective, the decision made very little sense. Building a performance car from scratch requires enormous capital, deep engineering expertise, and an established supply chain. Ferruccio had the capital. What he needed was the people. He recruited experienced engineers, including several who had recently left Ferrari. One of them was Giotto Bizzarini, an engine designer, precise, methodical, deeply talented. Ferruccio gave him one directive: build a V12 engine better than Ferrari's, no budget ceiling. And for every single horsepower above Ferrari's benchmark, a direct cash bonus. Ferrari's V12 at the time used a single overhead camshaft per bank, a reliable design, but not a racing one. Bizzarini built something different. A quad-cam V12, 4 camshafts total. The same configuration used in Formula One cars at the time. More camshafts meant more precise control over the engine's valves, the ability to rev higher, and significantly more power. The result, 360 horsepower. Ferrari's comparable engine produced around 300. It was not marginally better. It was in a different class entirely, but the road to launch was not clean. At the 1963 Turin Auto Show, the prototype, called the 350 GTV, had a critical problem. The engine did not fit the chassis. The show could not be postponed, so Ferruccio made a decision. The engine bay was loaded with ballast to maintain the correct ride height. The hood was locked shut for the entire exhibition. When journalists asked to see the engine, the answer was always the same: the key was not available. The design was praised regardless. By 1964, the production 350 GT was ready, faster, more refined, and more reliable than its direct competitors. Then, in 1966, came the Mira, a mid-engine layout, meaning the engine sat behind the driver, not in front. This was almost unheard of in a road car at the time. The result was better handling, a lower center of gravity, and a silhouette unlike anything the automotive world had seen. The press didn't have language for it. They had to invent new descriptions. Ferrari's existing models suddenly looked like they belonged to a different era. Lamborghini was no longer a new entrant. It was the benchmark. He had won, or so it seemed. By the early 1970s, Lamborghini had achieved everything Ferruccio set out to build. The cars were selling, the name was established, the competition had been answered. But here is something easy to forget at this point in the story. Ferruccio was still running two companies simultaneously, the tractor business that started everything, and the supercar company built on rage. Here is how the two were connected. The tractor company was profitable, stable, and cash generative. That cash was quietly funding the supercar operation, the engineering, the staff, the facilities. The tractors were the life support keeping Lamborghini's cars alive. Then, 1973 arrived, and everything unraveled at once. The first blow came from Bolivia. A military coup overthrew the government overnight. The incoming regime immediately canceled a legally binding order for 5,000 tractors, 5,000 units, already in production, suddenly unsellable. The cash that had been keeping the supercar company breathing, gone instantly. The second blow was global. The OPEC oil embargo sent fuel prices to levels no one had anticipated. Overnight, wealthy buyers stopped ordering V12 supercars. Showrooms that had been full went quiet. The third blow was domestic. Extreme labor union strikes paralyzed Italian manufacturing for months. Production at the factory ground to a halt. Within months, a company at the top of its industry was operating on the edge of insolvency. Ferruccio was 58 years old. He had spent 30 years building two empires from nothing. Both were now collapsing simultaneously. He sold 51% of Automobili Lamborghini to a Swiss businessman. 1 year later, the remaining 49%. He sold his tractor company as well. He lost everything that bore his name. He retreated to a large estate in Umbria, in the heart of Italy. 740 acres, vineyards, fiats, quiet. He spent his last years on that land, making wine, raising horses, surrounded by the same kind of earth he had once spent his entire youth trying to escape. He never returned to the automotive industry. On February 20th, 1993, Ferruccio Lamborghini died. He was 76. The company changed hands multiple times after his death. It went through bankruptcy proceedings, near closure, years of uncertainty. Eventually, it was acquired by Audi and stabilized into the brand it is today. But none of that changes where it started. Ferruccio Lamborghini never received an apology from Enzo Ferrari. He never asked for one. Every Lamborghini ever built is the apology. Now, the next story. Before Lamborghini was building supercars, another European brand was building something very different. Tanks for the Third Reich. And the man who founded that company was not just a Nazi party member. He was prisoner number 42,441, convicted of using slave labor in his own factories. That brand is Porsche. That story is next.